Hi, I'm AJ, as you just heard. Most people's first impression of me is, whoa, that guy has one hand. Some people, especially kids, like to say it out loud. I like to reply with something like, where? Or he went that way. My limb difference has always been one of the first things that's defined me. Think of it this way. If you see a person with blue hair walking down the street, you don't see just another person, you think, that person has blue hair. Pretty casual, you've probably experienced that before. Now imagine that same scenario, but with something a lot of people have maybe never seen before. When I meet people, I'm just another person, until they notice I have a prosthetic arm and hand. For convenience purposes, and because it makes me sound really cool, I'll be saying my robot hand. So, when people notice I have a robot hand, the image of me they had is completely restructured and replaced with a flurry of questions. Questions like, how did you lose your hand? How does the robot hand work? Can you take it off? Are you left-handed? Not everyone will ask the same questions, but it's very easy to tell when someone wants to ask something. And of course, sometimes they do, and it can feel like I'm being interviewed. Strangers will even stop me in the street to ask questions and compliment my robot hand. It feels like I'm a celebrity sometimes. And it really does show how it is the first thing that defines me. And it's been like that since I was little. Some of my earliest memories are going to physical therapy and having appointments at a hospital for people with limb differences and other disabilities. I was lucky enough to have a lot of mobility, and I didn't have that much trouble with most tasks, but I still had to go, and it was a pain. I remember all of the adults in my life worrying if I could do basic tasks. Things like tying my shoelaces, putting my hair up when it used to be longer, and just other everyday things like that. And as a kid, I was always confused because I just didn't have as much trouble as they expected me to have. And I was always frustrated when people underestimated me. Even now, I don't think there's a lot that I can't do that able-bodied people necessarily can. Can you double-handed people do this? Need a hand? I don't think any of you have heard those words more than I have. Now, I definitely enjoy one-hand jokes, but they can get repetitive. I'm still very happy I can make them, though, because it was not always like this. Before I got the robot hand, I tended to be more shy when I met people because I knew people were uncomfortable around me as a kid missing an arm. Starting at new schools over the years is when I could really take notice of that difference in how I was perceived and learn how to deal with it. I've moved around a bit and been the new kid many times, but I never really had trouble making friends. I remember when I was first getting to know someone at a new school, I had joined a group of friends, we started talking and hanging out more, and he told me that when he first saw me, he panicked. He distinctly remembers being in a coffee shop many years ago with his younger sister, and apparently she shouted, "That guy has no arm." And he obviously freaked out and told her she could not just say that. Now, more likely than not, it was me, but I have absolutely no memory of this, which I think really shows how it's happened so many times that it didn't stand out enough for me to remember it. We eventually became good friends, and he's a very funny guy and would not hold back on me. And he's definitely made some of the best one-hand jokes I've heard. But once I'm more comfortable with people, I am myself, and I tend to be more of a loud, outgoing person. And once people got to know me more, they would tell me I was so much more than they thought I'd be. That translated in my head to, you are no longer defined by your disability to me. So, over many years and in many different settings, I had the desire to prove myself. I wanted to be seen as just another person, and I was scared of just being seen as the disabled kid. Here's a difference I've noticed in how I'm perceived then versus now. Before I got the robot hand, the kid with no arm tended to be a sensitive subject. People didn't want to ask questions, they didn't really know what to say, and I've gotten some weird looks. But the kid with a prosthetic, a robot hand, that's cool. People are curious, they ask questions, they give compliments, which opens the grounds for conversation. It does also help that I've gotten better with those conversations as I've gotten older. Getting a robot hand in middle school made me more approachable, But I'm still the same person, with or without it. I take my prosthetic off when I get home for comfort, and I'm still me. But for the most part, because of that difference in how I'm perceived, I almost never go outside without wearing my robot hand. But it's gotten better. I try to take it off more now when it's convenient, because there are a lot of times when it is more convenient and comfortable to not be wearing it. And for a lot of different tasks, I actually function better without it. For example, I'm a very fast typer. I type with one hand at the same speed as most of my classmates. But if we're working on essays or we just have a lot to write for whatever reason that involves typing, I will now take off my robot hand because I can type even faster using both my left hand and my shorter arm. So even though I might get stares, and I definitely still fight that urge to look as normal as possible, I will take off my robot hand in public if it just makes sense for me to do so. And this is a part of me just trying to be myself without trying to prove anything or look normal. And that's something I think everybody has to struggle with, not just visibly disabled people or whatever it is that makes you feel like you don't fit in. Now, I'm not going to convince you that we're all the same, because we're not, but I do know this. It is completely okay to stand out. And once I realized this, I decided to just stop hiding. One of my teachers told me that when I was a freshman, I would subconsciously try to hide my robot hand. But he noticed I don't really do that anymore. Now, I didn't know I was doing this, but that comment made me realize how far I've come. When I hide, I don't gain anything except a little less temporary discomfort and a continuing fear of being judged. But I understand that there are times when standing out does matter. Specifically, the way you look might matter. For me, this is when I'm doing theater. I'm a very passionate theater kid, and I love being on stage, if you couldn't tell. But in middle school, I lost confidence, like most moody tweens do. And I didn't do anything theater-related for years. I was so scared to get back into theater because I thought that now that I'm older, my disability would start to matter in more serious productions. And I was terrified. I didn't want to have to stand in an audition room full of other actors and directors and think to myself, I do not fit in, and I cannot play the roles that I want. This was a time when it seemed my disability did matter. I thought I'd have to fight harder and be better to get the same roles. Maybe this is the case, but I've stopped being such a pessimist since my middle school days, and in my sophomore year, I decided to try getting back into theater. And I discovered people are still willing to cast me because I'm talented, and they wanted me to play those roles. And it didn't really matter. Recently, I played Grover, one of the leads in the Lightning Thief musical, and then I played JD, the male lead in the Heathers musical. In these cases, people saw me for more than my disability and were willing to adapt. I also found that there were roles I was cast in as not despite my disability, but fully embracing it. In the last few years, I've also played Ricky Potts in Ride the Cyclone and Richard in a modern adaptation of Shakespeare's Richard III. Both of these characters are visibly disabled, and their disabilities are an important part of their characters. There are roles for disabled people out there. I definitely have to be more resourceful, but in a time that I thought my disability would hinder me, it actually helped that I stood out. Maybe there are times where I'm not going to fit in a director's vision. But then I thought to myself, maybe there should be more roles that can be played by disabled actors, and more people like the ones I've been so lucky to work with that are incredibly accommodating and open-minded, especially towards disabled people. And there should definitely be more roles that embrace disabilities, because I know I'm talented and I know a lot of other disabled actors that are too. And our stories deserve to be told authentically. When I rediscovered my love for theater, it genuinely changed my life. I felt I had some passion and direction in my life again. And I remembered, I'm damn good at this. I plan to pursue theater in college, and I hope to be the disabled representation that I didn't see growing up. But if I didn't risk being a little uncomfortable and standing out, I would not have met some of the most important people in my life, and things would look so different for me. And I definitely don't think I would have had the confidence to walk on the stage and talk to all of you. Everybody has things about themselves that they hide because they think they won't fit in. Most people are afraid to stand out. As someone who's been forced to stand out my entire life, I can tell you it is completely okay to take up space and be noticeable in a crowded room. In fact, I strongly encourage it. Wear something you never usually wear. Dye your hair blue and just try new things that might be noticeably out of your ordinary because you can. You have free will. Now, I know what you're going to say. What if people judge me? This can be a valid fear, but it's probably not as much as you think it is. I mean, really, how much do you think about someone you saw that stood out on the street? Do you actually remember them in the long run? Or, I know I can't remember the strangers with blue hair I've seen, even though I'm sure I took notice of them at the moment. Or even at school or work. Is that moment where you notice someone is different than you, or different than their usual self? Is that any more than a possible footnote in all the other worries and thoughts in your day? Everyone is constantly walking around hoping they look okay and normal too. We are the ones that notice ourselves the most, and we tend to be the harshest in judgment. So don't be afraid to stand out. And yes, I am left-handed.